do you have any proposals for more things to be done along that line, or?
I think that Texas needs to continue its work, modeled after what is happening in the Innocence Project. That's not happening all over the state right now. It's deserving of a more thorough application, I guess is the best way I can articulate that.
Okay, I'd like to move on to transportation. We'll have a vote in November on transportation fund. Is that enough?
No.
What else do we need to do?
Not nearly. It's a drop in the bucket. Last legislative session, TxDOT asked us for, I believe it was $4 to $5 billion in the biennial budget just to keep pace with where we are. They didn't get half that in the budget, and of course what voters will be asked to vote on is going to help create a more consistent funding stream for transportation, but it's still not getting us even to the place of keeping pace with the existing level of congestion and maintenance that we have in place today. There has to be a long-term solution for transportation, and you may know, Mike, I served on the Regional Transportation Council during my time on the City Council. I was a part of helping to put together what became the local option bill in my role as a City Council person. And then when I went to the Senate and had the privilege of serving under Senator Corona's chairmanship, I worked really hard with him to try to move that bill through. It was one that, of course, was born from ideas here in North Texas, which I'm very proud of, but then other urban communities all jumped on board, and before we knew it, that bill included, every major urban area in the state. We did succeed in getting it out of the Senate, and that's to the credit of Chairman Corona, who literally muscled the bill through. But unfortunately, we had, once again, a failure of leadership in place that told us, you put that bill on my desk and I will veto it. We obviously need a different approach when we are bringing forward solutions, thoughtful solutions to these challenges.
So, are you saying that some sort of a local option is still a good thing to look at?
I think it's definitely worth looking at. I also know, as a member of the legislature, that there are other good ideas on the table for how to create funding streams to meet our transportation challenges. Interestingly, many of these are coming from the Republican side of the aisle, and that just shows you that we really are all concerned together in how we meet these challenges. And I know that the legislature is anxious to have leadership that says, I'll partner with you on meeting these challenges. I'll be open to your ideas and we'll work to address them, versus leadership that's saying from the get-go, don't even consider putting something like that on my desk.
This may be a little bit too inside baseball for some people, but should we open up Fund 6 to something other than roads and bridges?
Yes. There's a little bit of movement on that in the legislature right now. There's a small piece of it that's now dedicated toward us looking at alternative forms of transportation. We're not going to build enough roads ever to meet our transportation needs in Texas, and I'd like to see us moving even more in that direction.
And one last thing on transportation, high-speed rail. Do you see a state role in that?
I do see a state role in that, and I think it's an important opportunity for us to take very seriously as we plan our transportation future. Creating that triangulated transportation model that's been talked about for high-speed rail that would connect Houston and North Texas, Central Texas, and San Antonio, I think is a very good idea and can add an important layer to transportation movement in the state.
Okay. Juvenile justice, criminal justice, we talked a little bit about the death penalty. Do you see things that need to change in that? And of course, don't step on Senator Whitmire's toes.
Yes.
Do you see things that we need to be doing on juvenile justice, criminal justice?
I think the thing that I would most press upon in that regard is for young people who are in our juvenile justice system, that we're providing a safe place for them to be, that we have a focus on helping them to make their way back into our community as citizens with an opportunity to succeed. I know that Senator Whitmire is sensitive to those things as well, and I think he serves us very well in trying to take a thoughtful approach to that.
Okay. Are we going to see casino gambling back?
Well, Anna was asking that question.
Or you said, I'm sorry.
Yes,
That's
so
right.
I think if the legislature wants to put that before the voters, that's something I agree should happen.
Okay. Troopers on the board.
Yes.
More of them?
Perhaps. I think that it's most important that we work with those local border communities to help us define the resources that they feel that they need. I think it's unfortunate that when we talk about the border, it seems to be the case that we talk about it only in terms of security issues and crime. Of course, we know that El Paso, for the 4th year in a row, was just named the safest large city in America. Laredo's crime rate compared to Lubbock's is dramatically lower. But somehow, whenever we talk about our border communities, it's always from the perspective of talking about crime. I think we need to be sensitive to the language we use when we talk about them. There is a very important economic symbiotic relationship between our border communities and Mexico that benefits their economy and benefits the state economy. And when I've visited these areas, one of the things I'm hearing as a pressing need is more resources at the border for purposes of allowing the goods to be transported more efficiently and quickly, with the eye toward the value of that economic exchange as opposed to the threat of it.
So the border crime is not third world, is what I'm
I
hearing?
would not use those words to characterize the border. No.
Could I ask just 2 campaign questions briefly? You mentioned Ann Richards. Do you see your campaign similar in any way to the campaigns that Ann Richards ran, first against Governor Clemens and then with George W. Bush? And 2, there's a story today saying how many people from the Obama campaign who are now in your campaign. Is that part of your strategy? And do you foresee President Obama coming to Texas to campaign for you?
On the Ann Richards question, the similarity I think I could most immediately point to would be the fact that Ann centered her campaign message around being someone who would represent everyday Texans and return the capital to the people, be a voice for people. I certainly share that sentiment, and it's part of my passion in wanting to run for this office. With regard to my campaign team, as I know you all know, there hasn't really been a structure for a lot of Democratic campaign talent in the state of Texas developed over the last couple of decades. In fact, we've been losing a lot of our talent to other races, both at the national and state levels elsewhere. And I'm very proud that we've been able to bring some of that talent back to Texas, and we're building our team with the resources, the human resources that we need to run the race that we need to run, and I'm very proud of who we've brought in to be able to help us achieve that.
There was a third part.
Oh, and the question about President Obama, I have not communicated with President Obama. He probably feels he has more important things to do than to come here and campaign for Wendy Davis. Davis.
But would you want him if he did?
Well,
at the
of course,
time?
I would respect our president wanting to come and say anything positive about me.
You don't see that as a drawback?
No.
Okay. Voter ID. Where are we on that as far as the legal issue? How are we going to be moving forward?
Right now, it's in court, in federal court here in Texas. The state had asked that the trial be delayed until 2015, arguing that they needed more time to develop the discovery materials that would be needed to put the trial on. One of the plaintiffs' groups argued otherwise, the one led by Mark Vesey, and the judge set the trial for September so that she could hear it in anticipation of the November elections. Just this last week, there was another effort by the state to move the trial to 2015. She heard the argument, and my understanding is that she went forward with laying a discovery schedule out that was fairly aggressive. So I think it will stay on track to be heard before this election, though, you know, I can't predict with certainty that that's the case.
What would we do, what could we do that would make voter ID acceptable in Texas?
There was an excellent, of course, recommendation that was put together, bipartisan one, the Carter-Baker report, that talked about the fact that assuring integrity at the ballot box was important, but also talked about the fact that creating access to be able to vote was very, very important. And their recommendations were layered very pointedly to assure that we weren't disenfranchising people who legally possess the right to vote today. Unfortunately, when the legislature pushed forward with voter ID in Texas, they only took part of that in their plan and did nothing on the let's ease access to getting registered side. Of course, we want to know that people who are voting legally. But it's interesting that in Texas, in spite of a great deal of money spent by the Attorney General's office to prove otherwise, there was really very little evidence of any voter fraud, in-person voter fraud going on. To the contrary, evidence points to if any voter fraud is occurring, it's occurring in the mail-in arena. But that's an equal opportunity destroyer, and we haven't seen Republican leadership try to advance any changes in that arena.
Okay, so it's not a problem of voter ID, it's a problem of access to voter ID and thus access to the ballot.
That was one of the concerns that I voiced when we were debating the voter ID bill, and I had a big whiteboard where I showed the circular nature of what it takes to get legitimate ID. And to get this one, you have to have these two, but to get one of these two, you have to have this one. And unfortunately, even though at the state level, we've assured that a voter photo ID card could be given by the Texas Department of Transportation at no cost, there is a cost to getting the underlying documents. And for some folks in our community, getting the underlying documents is impossible. People who weren't born at a hospital, for example, who may not have the benefit of a birth certificate. Anytime we put an impediment in the way of getting a photo ID that's valid for voting, we're creating a problem of disenfranchisement. And that was my concern and the concern of many of my colleagues in the Senate. We, of course, argue that other forms of ID should be acceptable. Student IDs, for example. In other states, this was allowed as a form of acceptable ID, and there were some other forms of ID. Work badges, for example, could be used. In other states where photo ID has been implemented, they've taken care to make sure there are safety valves for people who can't get them. The ability to vote by affidavit, and to vote in that affidavit to demonstrate that you are a person who does not have the financial means to get your underlying documents for a photo ID. That's something that has been allowed in other states. These are things I think we have to be terribly sensitive to. Everyone wants to know that only legal voters are voting, but I think we should be equally concerned that all legal voters should be able to vote.
Okay, other questions from this side of the table?
How would you characterize how you would be as governor? Describe what Wendy Davis would be like as governor.
I will be a governor who sets a vision, a forward-thinking vision for this state, and one who's not afraid to focus our efforts on the real challenges. I will be a governor who will not act in a way that invites partisanship, division. I will be a governor that reflects the priorities of people who I've been talking to across the state. A governor that understands that we need to prioritize public and higher education and creating a future opportunity for every child in Texas. A governor that understands that we have some very real challenges on our hands in the infrastructure and the transportation and water infrastructure arenas, and that we need to address those for our economy. A governor who understands that women deserve to be paid equally for equal work, that there are very real pressing healthcare needs in our community that demand our attention. And of course, one that is sensitive to the incredible economy that we have in Texas, continuing to foster the climate of economic friendliness that we've had here, but also uses our resources to grow that and strengthen it, and understands that if we don't, we're going to head a direction that is not the place that is a direction I think most people in the state would want to see us go.
Wendy, you just said that you would, a part of your vision for being governor would be to not invite partisanship, division, and we know how difficult that is in places like Washington, and we know that President Obama said he was going to be a post-partisan president, and the rancor has reached a fever pitch there. What specifically would you do to breach some of those cleavages between the parties that erupt in horrible debates and whatnot?
I would empower all voices to be at the table and helping to guide the policy making and the shaping of our vision for Texas. And I would stop doing something very important. What's been happening in the legislature, certainly in my 6 years there, is that our leadership has thrown partisan issues on the table, forcing legislators to go into their partisan corners and come out fighting. The issues that really matter in Texas are not partisan ones. Education doesn't have a partisan affiliation to it. Transportation, water, creating a sound economy. None of these things have partisan ideals attached to them. And I believe that a governor who is careful and thoughtful about not putting on the table things that are divisive is one that will create a climate that we can all work together. This last legislative session, prior to us getting derailed in special session, was really a good working session for the legislature. We teased each other that it was a kumbaya session because we worked so well, and there was a lot of push and pull, but ultimately we achieved some things that were very important for the people of Texas. We added $3.4 billion back to public education, and we didn't start there at the beginning of session either. But I was proud to play a strong role in helping us get there. And I think that I have the capacity and the ability to work with people in a way that helps them set their partisanship aside to get things done.
Is there any question that you're glad we didn't ask?
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
I can't think of
Okay,
anything.
Wendy, I was going to ask, what are the experiences you gained, now that I've been here a while in Fort Worth, what are the experiences you gained in the city council that you think will benefit you as governor?
Most importantly, that I didn't serve with any kind of a partisan affiliation next to my name. I served 4 years under Ken Barr and 5 years under Mayor Moncrief, different types of leaders, but both of whom, of course, really set a vision for Fort Worth. The thing that I think is one of my biggest strengths that I bring to the table has to do with my experience in the economic development arena. I chaired the Economic Development Committee here for 7 of the 9 years that I was on the council, approximately 7. And I was privileged to help put together public-private partnerships that really changed the face of this city and created an investment of millions of dollars and thousands of jobs. And I think Texas needs a governor who has that kind of experience. There's no better indicator, I think, of the difference between what I would offer in that regard than what Greg Abbott would offer than the American Airlines merger. I was immediately supportive of that merger and understood what it meant to our economy and to our job base here and across the state. And of course, he took a contrary position to that. I think that says a lot about our understanding of what it means to invest in and hold on to the jobs that we have here.
Did you try to ban guns in Fort Worth when you were on the city council?
No, I tried to close the gun show loophole. And I still, of course, believe that universal background checks are important in gun sales.
Have you figured out whether you would find a state role in trying to make that happen, since it hasn't happened still in all these years? Both not just the gun shows, but also now you've got the internet sales. And we've got some really big places in Fort Worth, as you know, cheaper than dirt and other. I mean, the internet sales are just tremendous. Is there a state role in trying to make these things happen?
It's not really a state decision, as you know. It will be made at the federal level. But I do think it's a good idea to have background checks on gun sales.
Okay, what have we not talked about that you want to talk about? Anything?
Can't think of anything. I think we covered a lot of bases. Thank you.
We did. Thanks again.
Thank you,
for
Mike.
coming in. It's been